Okay, I'm going to do a little how to assemble a flatland bike. This is an Aries 18-inch and straight out of the box. First off, we got our pegs and pedals. Next we have our beautiful bike. These are set up with all 4 pegs, front and rear brakes, and it has a free coaster, so that enables you to do all kinds of tricks. And I see that my audience can't see. Not you audience, but this audience. I'm going to move this box out of the way. And first off, I just cut off all the zip ties and take off all this extra stuff. Make sure to use this tool very carefully because it is sharp. And I just carefully cut it off so you're not cutting the frame. So just cut the masking tape ever so lightly, and then this will remove it. Okay, cut. All right, so now we've taken all the packaging off and we're all ready to go. The first thing generally I'll do is put the pedals on, and I look on the pedal and there's a little R, so that means the right side. And then there's a pedal that's for the left side with a little L. The funny thing about this pedal is it's reverse direction. So I remember righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, or if you have your hand like this, the way that your fingers go is the way that the direction of the bolt will go. Standard if you use your right hand. On this pedal, you have to use your left hand. So when I tighten it this way, going around clockwise, it's going to go in. So in this case, it's opposite of what you normally would think. Okay, we'll tighten them up afterwards, but I'm just going to get them started. Next thing I usually do is I adjust the seat a little bit. I put it kind of midway. Got a little sticker still left on there. And adjust that with an Allen wrench. So this is a 5. This is a great tool. It's a tri-wrench. So it's got a 5, a 4, and a 6. Very universal, very helpful for most of your Allen wrenches on your bike. Get that pretty nice and snug. The test is going to be like this. Kind of make sure it doesn't move side to side. The next one I do is I put the handlebars on. So this one is actually a 6. And you guys, I don't think they can hear me if you're talking. I'm happy if you're talking, if you could just go over a further way. All right, so these kids are eager to try this bike out, I think. And here, can you come show the other bikes? Here's a couple examples. Here's the Aries in the 12-inch model. What do you think of it? Do you like it? Is it ride nice?
Yeah.
Okay. And then there's another one, Daisy, come on over. She's got the one that we're building right now, which is the 16-inch. This one is a little bit bigger. It's got free coaster, all the brakes and the pegs. Great. Okay, so back to our assembly. I'm going to loosen up the stem bolts, all 4 of these, and I will put the handlebars on. So now I flip the bike over and I just get the wheels set up. So I'm going to put the front wheel on. Brakes are already loosened so that you don't have to worry about loosening the brakes. Typically, if you're changing your wheel or whatnot, you'd have to disconnect your brake in order to pull the wheel off easily. In this case, I'm going to take these bolts all the way off and the washers because I'm going to put these pegs on. These are really nice, super light aluminum pegs with some nice grip on them. So this is a good peg to start off with. And the trick to this is I take the washer, put the washer in, I take the bolt and I put the bolt in the socket, and then I quickly put it like this. That way you have it all set up and then it's easier to get on there. I actually take the ratchet off for this first part and I just tighten this down. That makes it a lot easier to get started. You could spend several moments and minutes trying to just get that all lined up. First I'm just going to kind of snug it. Then I'll do the same thing with this side. Put the washer in, put this on here, and then go like that. Make sure you got the washer in there. And then you can just line it up as you get this peg on. You can just start twisting it, lines up. All right, so one important part about putting on handlebars is when you tighten the stem, you want to make sure that this plate is actually even. Oftentimes you'll start to tighten one side and it will crank down too much and it will get really close here and there'll be a bigger gap at the bottom. So just make sure that you tighten it snug first and then check to make sure that it's even. So I'm just going to tighten these nice and snug, just close to it, and then look to make sure it looks pretty good and even. Then I'm going to set my bars up, and I'm putting them up pretty much straight up and down, maybe a little bit of adjustment once we have the front wheel on. And now I'm going to crank these harder, but not all the way tighten. Remember to do that on the final step. So when I put the back pegs on, I do one at a time because from the factory it's already set, and you can see the chain is already nice and set. And if you check to make sure the wheel's centered, it's going to be easier if you put one peg on and crank it all the way down, as opposed to the front ones. I didn't tighten them all the way down. First, I'll adjust that later. But that way the wheel, you don't have to readjust the wheel. If it did come out of alignment, you just have to make sure that you pull back and you got the chain nice and tight. You tighten down this side first generally, and then you tighten the other side. That's usually how I do it. And make sure that your wheel is nice and centered. So we'll just loosen this bolt and then put on the pegs. And now we've got the back all tightened, and I'll snug up the front, make sure that this is lined up and even. I usually use just my fingers to kind of judge the distance between the rim and the fork. And then I really crank down on this to make sure there's no slippage. And I do this side, and then I go back on this side and do that last little, make sure it's nice and tight. Okay, that seems good. We'll also tighten up the pedals. Right side is the regular thread, so we're going to go the regular direction, which is the wrong way I just went, because this is the left side, because the bike's upside down. Confuses me always, but you figure it out. Okay. With this, I generally hold it like so, and I get a good snug tight on that. This, which is the right peg, right pedal, in the right direction. And again, get that nice position. Crank on it. Okay, so now you got basically your pedals, pegs all dialed in. You still need to adjust your bars a bit and put your cables on and set up your brakes. And now we're going to adjust the handlebars to make sure they're in the right position. So the first thing I do, generally these are not all the way tightened down from when you get from the factory. So I loosen this up a little bit and I straighten it out. What I do is I look at the handlebars and I measure it down with the pegs, and I can see when they're completely lined up. And then I tighten them a little bit just to make sure that you don't have to adjust this part, which is going to adjust it where the bearing is. So if there's any bit of play, or if the bars don't spin well, like right now, see, they're a little bit tight. So I want to back off on this and adjust it by loosening this bolt. Okay, so now I've adjusted it, and you can see the bars are spinning much nicer for bar spins. And then there's also no play. I don't feel any kind of jiggle when I move it side to side. That's essential. And again, I'm going to check to make sure it hasn't gone off alignment with the pegs, and the bars and the pegs still look straight. Now I'm going to tighten these side ones. And I think a good trick, the tri-wrench is great, but to finalize it, I use an Allen wrench. And then I put another wrench on top of there to give a little extra leverage, just so I can give it that extra. It's another little trick of the trade. Or you can use a nice long Allen wrench. But that should be good. Maybe check this side one last time, just to make sure we don't have any handlebars, any handlebars slipping. That did need another little crank. Now this one. Okay, that seems good. Now all we need to do is put some cables on and pump up our tires. Okay, so next we're going to put the front cable on. This is already pre-cut for the right length for the front brake, so it's super easy. There's a little knob that you put into the lever right here, and there's a little groove that the cable goes through, and then you have to line this barrel adjuster up so that the cable will slip in that little crevice there, and then line the cable up. Then you drop this one through your gooseneck. This was a POTS mod that was invented in the 80s. was a nice feature because then we could spin the bars and the front cable wouldn't get tangled. Then they came out with the gyro, or actually it was an ACS rotor was the first one that came out, so you wouldn't tangle with the back cable. Again, this is all set up really nicely because the cable length will go over just in the right way, so that, let me just make sure I got this right, this way, I'm sorry, this way, and then you don't even need a zip tie because there's enough clearance between the fork and the tire that the cable won't rub. Sometimes you'll put a bike together and the cable's going to come down, you might want to zip tie that right there. So you run it through this little barrel adjuster, and you then loosen this with your handy dandy. This is another tri-wrench. So this is a 6, a 8, and a 10. And I'm pretty sure this is a 10. Yeah, so this is a 10. And then you're gonna slide this cable through the little hole on the other side of this barrel adjuster clamp thing. And then what I do is I hold the brakes down initially just to get that tightened up. And then we will adjust the brake pads. Okay, so to adjust the brake pads, you want your pads as flat and as even as possible. So that can be a little tricky because you need a third hand sometimes. So I just generally kind of play with it a little bit and get this cable adjusted to where it's pretty close to the rim, and then when I pull the brake, I can get the pads against the rim to help line them up. So I'm loosening. Once it's done, I'll let you test it out and make sure it's working well. Okay, so I'm just snugging these pretty tight and making sure that they're straight this way and that they're not rubbing too high on the rim so that they're rubbing against the tire. So this one's a little bit crooked, so the front is touching. I want it just about even. And then crank on it here, holding this pad so that the pad doesn't turn as you tighten it the last bit. We'll do one last crank on this side. And there you have it. So we got a little slippage of the cable, which is normal because we didn't tighten this down. So I'm going to loosen this down. I'm going to pull this as tight as I can, tighten this back up. You're always going to have your cable stretched just a bit after you've ridden it for a few days. So you might have to adjust it. So I've got that really tightened right now. So I'm going to stretch it even right now, making sure that it's not slipping. Okay, that's pretty good. And then we will do some last final adjustments and it should be good to go. So now we have the rear cable. This is called a gyro cable. That's for the back brake. And again, this is sized for this particular handlebar in this bike. So it's got a really short end. There's a longer one and a shorter one. So the longer one is going to go to the left side of the cable plate, gyro plate, and then the right one will go here. And I just realized I forgot one more thing, so I'll be right back. Okay, I found what I was missing. I thought these were already on the bike, but the cable comes with four different barrel adjusters. And this particular one uses the black one, which is the smaller barrel adjusters. So we'll set these ones aside and we'll put these barrel adjusters in on this top plate. Okay, so now we've adjusted the cable, and I'm going to just make sure to tighten the barrel adjusters because they're very easy to go out of alignment. So I use a 10 millimeter and I just crank on this. I hold the top part so that it doesn't move, and then I just tighten these snug so that there's no adjusting that's happening that you don't want. And the last thing we're going to do is dial in the back brake. The cable's already all hooked up. All we need to do is just bring the brake shoes in a little bit closer because you can see the brake lever is all the way to the handlebar and the brakes are just hitting. So we want the brake to come in quite a bit longer. So what I do is I disconnect the brake and I tighten this cable, make this cable a little bit shorter. There is a barrel adjuster, but I wouldn't recommend using that quite yet because the cable's going to stretch and you're going to want to use that as the cable stretches to adjust it when you're riding. Okay, so what I do is I reach through here and I pinch the levers or the brake together and I unhook the cable right there. This will allow me to adjust this cable. I'm just going to pull this stopper up just a little bit in order to take that play out. And this barrel adjuster's all the way down right now. So I've got a 10 millimeter on the top and a 10 millimeter on the bottom. I'm going to loosen that, and then I'm going to slide it up just about I don't know, about 5 centimeters maybe. And this is really important to tighten because it will slip very easily if you pull the brake hard, which you will be pulling the brakes hard when you're doing tricks. So I always recommend really cranking that hard. That's why I always have a top wrench to hold the top part and a bottom wrench to snug that down. And then we're going to hold these brakes together again. Hopefully there's enough to get that on there. It's barely enough, thank goodness. And now we got some good brake action. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is pump up the tires, and I think we'll be ready to go. Okay, so pumping up the tires. Now, a lot of riders will ride with super high pressure in the tires. I particularly don't. I only run about maybe 65 to 70 because I do a lot of hopping tricks. If you're doing spinning tricks or a lot of the new school rolling tricks, you want to pump your tires a lot harder. These are only rated, they say 40 to 65, so I'm going to put 65 in it. I think that's probably a pretty good pressure, but just realize that there are different things that you can do based on your pressure of your tires. So the harder the tire, the faster it's going to roll, and the easier it's going to spin. Okay, so now I've got both the tires pumped up to 65, and everything's pretty much good to go. I put a sticker on it because I want to make sure that I remember it's a Team Bike It. It's in the Team Bike It fleet. So I put one of these guys on there. A couple other things I want to mention. So these have 3-piece cranks. They got plastic pedals, which are great. They've got these nice tapered forks to give you lots of room to step on the pegs. Integrated headset. This bike is really designed to last. It's going to be a much better quality than you might find at department stores. So I recommend if you have a rider that's getting into freestyle and they're really serious about it, to invest a little bit more. This retails for right around, I think, $379 plus shipping. You can get them online at Flatland Fuel. I believe that they're out of stock on this particular model, but you can definitely check out to see what they have available, and that's a really good source for a good Flatland bike. Okay, so you want to go take it for a spin? All right, thanks for watching.